Hello, São Paulo. Happy to be here. My name is Maria Greicer. I'm a VP Partnerships at Keymakr, data labeling. Now, today we will speak about how medical labeling is done, why is it needed, and why is it crucial. So here we go. Okay, today we'll cover general cases, like what is currently developed right now in the market, how it's developed, why quality data matters, and of course the challenges that we face. And the biggest question that we're usually asked is like, will we need people in medicine in the near future and in the long-term future as well? Okay, so a couple examples of medical AI applications, just like to give you a little background about what we're talking about, like what's the actual real life use cases for all this thing. So for example, there's amazing technology being developed right now for real-time radiology, for emergency rooms, or for general practice diagnosis. So for example, recognition of cancer cells, recognition of free fluid, recognition of damages, like things that are really critical, hard to identify, but are life-threatening. So all those cases that we rely on specialists right now are actually being automated. We're teaching AI how to recognize those cases, how to find them and identify them, and provide precise results. Now, another interesting use case is remote diagnosis. So, for example, if we have a remote location somewhere up north or in locations that are rural and you don't really have a hospital, but you still have people who need to be diagnosed with especially something urgent. So instead of taking the person from this rural location to the nearest hospital, which can be a few hours or even a few days, depending on location, we actually have a virtual clinic brought to them where the diagnosis, which is the most important part of any treatment, is being done remotely, automatically, with help of AI, and that basically saves lives. Okay, so how does it work? So just again, a little bit of a background. Currently, there is an incredible number of new models that are being developed and launched to the market in any medical AI application. Just like a short list of those models, but there are many more. But just for reference, there's quite a lot of research going on. And how does it work? How do we train? Like, how do we create? How do we train medical AI? So, of course, it's all about the data, and why data is important. So, when we are developing a product, when I'm talking about product, I'm talking about a specific application. So each application, each use case, each diagnosis, let's put it this way, is a separate product in a way that has to go through, well, of course, we have to develop the models, we have to go through the training, and we have to go through approval, usually FDA approval, or depending on the country, depending on where the product is going to be launched globally or locally. So it has to go through approval process. So for developing the product, we of course need training data, which is collected from users, people who actually have this case, or people who don't have this case but looks like they do. So we have to collect training data, actual real life training data from actual people. For example, MRI scans or ultrasound scans. We have to label this data, train the algorithm on this data. That makes the product, like the more training data we have, the better labeling is, the better is the product. And of course, the more people can use it, more broadly it can be applied. And more training data we have, the better the product gets. So it's basically a system that feeds itself. Again, how it works. So for example, where we have a brand new product, we have, for example, detection of free fluid in ultrasound scans for emergency rooms. So first stage would be to develop the system, the AI model. So that's part one, putting this aside. Second stage is we need to create a training data set for training this model. So that would be, we take unlabeled data, basically data collected from emergency rooms, from actual people, actual ultrasounds. We have a team of experts, or a company has a team of experts that label this data. The labeled training data goes into the model, and of course, after a few cycles of training, usually it's depending on complexity of the system, it can take it can be pretty quick or can be pretty lengthy, like even few years sometimes if it's a complex case. Then after a few cycles of training, we have a finalized AI product that can be certified by external organizations like FDA and approved to be used on the market. Okay, some examples of how the labeling actually looks like. So here is an example of MRI scans. Keylabs AI, it's our proprietary platform, but there are many other labeling platforms out there. So when an expert receives a data set, a labeled data set, we're talking about visual labeling here, visual imagery. So each object of interest or objects of interest would be labeled according to the model requirements. So each model is different, of course, every use case, every model has something unique of their own. So here we're doing an instance segmentation for the area of interest. But again, the annotation itself would depend on the actual model that is being trained. A couple other examples. So here we have an X-ray of hands, and what we are doing here is simply marking every bone in order to map out where the bones are. So the system, so the model could recognize where, like, what is the bone, where is the bone, and of course the name of each bone, and if there is a defect, I mean, the bone is broken or there's any issue with it, this issue would be labeled as whatever it is and classified appropriately. Next one. So again, there are so many different use cases. Keymakr, like in our case, we deal only with imagery data, but that's not the only type of data that's out there. So because we're dealing with imagery, so it's mostly X-rays, MRIs, ultrasounds like here, and it's labeling by certified. Usually when labeling is done, it's done by a certified expert who is the most appropriate person for a specific use case. So basically every use case, every model, every product would have like their own set of experts who are working on creating the training data. Okay, a couple examples here. Okay, now why annotations matter? Actually, that's a very interesting one. So will we need people in the future? Will we need any people working in the medical industry, let's say a few years from now? So here it's an example of how much training data is actually needed to create a model. So if you look to 2010, we don't need that much training data. It's kind of always here. Now, if you look at 2024, there are more models out there, and there's way more training data that is needed for creating training and operating those models. Now, why is that? It's like, think of your cell phone. Like the more pictures you have, the more memory you need. So like the capacity for memory is always increasing. Same with the models. The model's complexity is increasing. Of course, the model capabilities are increasing, therefore the complexity is increased, therefore we need training data. So actually the need for experts the need for human input right now is growing exponentially from year to year. So here, let's look at interesting research that was done last year, and that's a comparison between performance of GPT-4 versus physicians. And here's the GPT-4 alone performance, here's the physicians without GPT-4 and physicians with GPT-4. So actually we can see, this is for diagnosis. So actually we can see a trend where the AI alone performs better than physicians. No, that's preliminary research, but what we're going to see is more and more of less physicians, experts who are actually doing pathology or working on a case, working on identifying complex cases, would be using AI tools to help them to do their work better, faster, with more precision and more accuracy. Okay, now some challenges in the medical data labeling. So first of all, of course, as I said before, it's very, each use case is unique, like each use case needs its own training data, and sometimes finding less training data, sourcing less training data is very difficult. For example, if you want to train a model to recognize some specific disease, sometimes it's almost impossible to find people who are diagnosed with this specific issue, just again because of data privacy. It can be pretty tricky to source this type of data. Like, it's tricky to source medical data. So sometimes it's very hard even to find the basic training data set, like starting training data sets to even start training the model, because like, where do you find this data? How do you find this? So that's a challenge. Of course, there are hospitals, there are networks for sourcing data. We also, Keymakr, we source medical data, but sometimes we receive requests, say, that are more rare in a way. It's harder to find, but it's just impossible to source medical data for training those models. Another interesting challenge is expertise, because to train the model would be as good as the training data. If the training data is not precise enough, the model will not perform well. So here it's important that the annotation is done by the best experts, and it's done without any mistakes, or as less mistakes as possible. So this is sometimes can be tricky. And again, finding experts in a specific use case that would provide the most accurate diagnosis or the most accurate labeling, it can be tricky as well. And of course, managing this whole operation, that's also not easy. And last but not least is the bias in the data sets. So unfortunately, I guess like everything in our lives and data sets has bias. So when training the model, there's always some bias present. So this is something that data scientists and developing the project, something to keep in mind that has to be mitigated and taken into consideration, that there will always be some bias in the data. The model will always be biased in some way, and we have to continuously to address it and try to reduce the bias as much as possible. It's impossible to reduce it completely. Okay, so how we solve those problems? Kind of going back a little bit, annotating the data by experts. We do the annotation, we train the model gives us output. The output is validated again by humans. And we train the system and go back full circle a few times until the system performs well. Now, validation of the data, that's one point I would like to touch in a bit more detail. Why we need to do validation, why we need to continuously retrain the model. Well, few reasons. First of all, edge cases. There always will be edge cases in every model, in every application, every use cases, like as long as we work on recognizing a certain case. For example, For example, free fluid or even brain tumors, there always be like new cases that come up. So we have to train on those as well. Research, new research coming out. Of course, we want our models to be as much advanced and up to date as possible. And as going back to bias before, when model performs, even it performs well over time, it still needs to be checked and validated that it actually does what it's supposed to do. And there are no issues or kind of self-bias in a way. In terms of training data needed, sometimes we start, let's say, from 100% training data, and after, let's say, 1,000 images, for example, and after some time, the training data that is needed just reduced by 90%. You need just 10% of the original data set, or even 1% or 0.001%. So like less training data is needed, but more use cases are out there. Now what's important for the operation, like what's important for running efficient labeling operation? Of course, the annotations have to be performed by experts, has to be reliable. And I would say very, very important part here is quality assurance. And one thing that we see that is done, like that's requested in the industry, is that the same data would be reviewed by multiple experts. Just like this extra layer of validation and consensus on every case to ensure that whatever we train our model, like whatever the model is using, is actually validated by multiple people, and it's not and there is no way there is a mistake or mislabel in there. And of course, it's very important if we are working on a product that is that should be certified by FDA and actually applied in the market, applied in hospitals, for example. It has to go through all this strict validation and strict check to make sure that the product really, like the AI system, really meets the criteria and performs well. Now, bottom line, last slide, is that there is always this fear right now, I would say, in every industry that talks about like, okay, what's going to happen to all the people that are working in the industry? What's going to happen to all the professionals? What's going to happen to all the experts? Like, do we actually need doctors in like 5, 10, 30 years from now? The answer is yes, we do, and even more than now. The AI systems are there to help us to perform better, but not to replace. And there is one thing that AI, no AI can replace, is human touch and human intuition. And this is something that we see even in training data. At some cases, the experts, they know intuitively what's going on. And it's impossible to replicate this by any system. It's impossible to it's just like you kind of know in your gut somehow that this is what's going on with this case. So this is something that this like human touch cannot be replaced. So thank you so much. I hope I shared some interesting information for you. Keymakr, who we are. So we provide medical experts, labeling, data sourcing. If you have any questions, would you like more information, please contact us. Thank you very much.